from WAMU 88.5 at American University in Washington. Welcome to the Politics Hour starring Tom Sherwood. I'm Kojo Nnamdi. Later in the broadcast, we'll be joined by Rich Madaleno, who's a Maryland State Senator representing District 18, which includes Montgomery County. Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's a reporter for NBC4 and a columnist with the current newspapers. Tom, you may remember that back in the day, we used to have a guest analyst who was a loose lips columnist for City Paper and later worked for the Washington Post, who went on to become an elected official in the District of Columbia.
Whatever happened to her?
It is my understanding that yesterday she participated in a closed-door public council hearing. What was that all about?
Well, I was horrified by that vote. No, but really, this is a very serious matter that, Patrick Madden brought up in his reporting this summer, is whether or not the district, the Mayor Muriel Bowser's administration, tried to put its fingers on the scales of who got some contracts to clear land for the soccer stadium in Southwest and the basketball arena, Wizards basketball arena in Southeast, out by St. Elizabeth's. And so Mary Cheh, the council member who oversees the city's general services administration that handles contracts, held a hearing yesterday to find out basically what the hell happened. But in order to do it and not to violate some personnel matters, they went into executive session. And our guest is one of the council members who went into executive session. So as a former journalist, maybe that should be the first question. How does it feel to go into executive session?
Our guest, by the way, is Elissa Silverman. She's an at-large member of the D.C. Council. She is an independent. Welcome.
It's so much fun to come back as a politician to this show.
Miss Journalist participating in public closed-door hearings.
Hello, Kojo and Tom.
You have stood outside doors where meetings have been closed. You have written about secret meetings. You have, and this wasn't secret, obviously, but what does it feel like before you even get to the substance of the issue? You're a former journalist. You didn't seem all that enthusiastic voting to close the hearing, but Mary Cheh said maybe all this stuff will be made public after all, once it's kind of sorted out.
That's right, Tom. So there are sensitive personnel issues that are being discussed in this case. As you said, there are allegations of play politics, that an influential contractor, one of the biggest contributors in city politics, might have influenced some personnel decisions. It is common practice for personnel decisions to be discussed behind closed doors. It's in our council rules. Councilmember Cheh followed procedure in that her committee, of which I am not a member, took a vote to close the hearing based on the fact that there are sensitive personnel matters being discussed. I have to say I'm glad Councilmember Cheh has taken this so seriously. I think it is a serious matter. As she said, we are not coming to a judgment right now. This is about, it's fun. I will say this, I'm under a gag order about what was discussed, but I will say it's fun to see Councilmember Cheh in full prosecutor mode. And as for those who do not know, she's the Ward 3 council member and a law professor at George Washington University. But as Councilmember Cheh said, there are no judgments right now. What it is a discovery process in that the committee requested lots of documents. We're
Thousands of documents.
Yes. I've only seen a portion of them, but and we are reviewing them, discussing them with witnesses, and the process will continue today. I believe that either today or Monday will be the big witnesses, so to speak, the city administrator, Rashad Young, and Admiral Weaver, who sort of precipitated all the stories in his abrupt departure from the Department of General Services.
If you have questions or comments for the council member, call us at 800-433-8850. You can go to our website, kojoshow.org, watch the live video stream, ask a question or make a comment there. Send email to kojo@wamu.org or a tweet at kojoshow.
Well, just to be clear then, can the chairman of the committee, Mary Cheh, just simply go into executive session with
No.
the vote? You had the vote, right?
The committee, as I said, the Judiciary Committee, or no, not Judiciary, the Environment Committee on Environment, and I can't remember.
Transportation, all those things.
She's got a lot of stuff under her committee. Took a vote to close the session
back weeks ago.
Yes,
that is
yesterday,
correct. There weren't enough committee members to have a vote.
I believe we took another vote. As I said, I'm not a member of that committee, even though I'm participating in the hearing. The committee took another vote yesterday to then confirm that under council rules we should close the hearing.
I didn't think there was
so
of committee members.
Procedure have been followed. I will say I do watch the reporters like Mr. Sherwood and the Post reporters who sit outside the door, and I tell them that it's a confidential hearing and I'm under a gag rule to discuss it with them.
Well, let's talk about the politics, though, of the overarching issue, because Mary Chase said it to us, and Robert White said it about, and you just mentioned pay to play, which is a crucial corroding words if any of it's true. The concern here is that in the course of these two contracts, that the General Services Administration either A, went outside the bounds of what it is allowed to do and did something improper, or the mayor's office, the mayor's administration, tried to put, again, its finger on the scale and change the awards, which were not changed. People are asking, is this a window into bad contracting overall, or is this a one-off?
So I think it is a window into our contracting process, and there are a lot of questions asked about the contracting process. As you said, Tom, this is not a simple narrative, and I don't want to get into the weeds too much, but at issue is whether there was a change in how solicitations were evaluated and whether that change was legal and went through the proper process, and that bidders were aware of that change. But then there's also the issue that there were 2 district government employees from the Department of General Services who were fired, and that issue is whether that was that process went through the legal procedure and whether there might have been undue influence by a contractor in their firing.
Speaking of legal procedures, Tom, our guest as a member of the council is being requested by the Washington Teachers Union President Elizabeth Davis to censure Mayor Muriel Bowser for allegedly flouting the law and a review panel by making a public announcement before this panel reviewed the selection for new chancellor of D.C. Public Schools. This in a report from City Paper. His name, the new incoming chancellor, is Antoine Wilson. Elizabeth Davis says that the panel was supposed to be able to see the resumes of all of the individuals involved, and the mayor just shortly before announcing it simply announced it to the panel.
It's just to bring people up. On the day of the announcement of Mr. Wilson, I actually interviewed Ms. Davis at the Washington Teachers Union headquarters on Capitol Hill, and she made that complaint that she said that she thought she and the members of this advisory panel thought they were being gathered that morning to go over the 3 or 4 finalists and to look at the resumes, and then they were presented with Anton Wilson's selection, and they felt shorted. But she has been, unless I'm wrong, I think she's the only person who's actually publicly complained. I haven't heard any other complaints. But I don't know how much it is statutorily required, that is by law, or whether this would have been better politics for the mayor.
One gets the impression that since we've had the mayoral takeover of the D.C. school system, that one of its purposes was to try to avoid unnecessary review and unnecessary steps in the process, because there was a similar controversy over Adrian Fenty's
nobody knew who she was.
Michelle Rhee.
So we were talking about topics
of
which I'm not a committee member on the education committee either, but obviously education and our new chancellor is incredibly important to the future of our city. I just received the letter from the Washington Teachers Union this morning, so I haven't been able to review it thoroughly.
Will you give it great weight?
Like an ANC? Well, we're revising that too. But what I will say is there are questions about the process. I believe there was a law passed by the council after the creation of the chancellor and the selection of Michelle Rhee, that there needs to be a committee formed, and that committee should review the resumes of the top candidates before a candidate is chosen.
And the mayor should give serious consideration to the recommendations of the Washington Teachers Union.
Great weight. I have heard complaints not only actually by the teachers union, but I went to the chancellor's announcement at Eastern High School last week, and there was some chatter about this as well. I think Councilmember Grasso, who chairs the education committee, is taking these these concerns seriously and is looking into them.
It doesn't sound so much as maybe a legal mistake as just maybe a politically bad choice not to more, at least superficially, involve this committee before you make a decision.
Well, certainly we want community buy-in because we want all members of the public and our educators to be all focused on, I think, what is our biggest challenge, which is closing the achievement gap. And we don't want to be fractured and distracted because that's the main thing we need to do. I will also say that we have another big appointment in the police chief, and I think whatever issues occurred with perhaps unhappiness about the process with the chancellor, we should then use to inform the process for the selection.
But at some point, you want the
chief.
mayor to be the executive and make the decisions.
Well, she does have the
not
ultimate decision-making authority. I think the issue here is that there is, I think there is a requirement that she should have input, and that this committee that's selected to give her input should have reviewed the resumes of the top contenders.
The issue here is that we only have a limited amount of time in this
There's so many
broadcast,
great
and
topics,
there are
Kojo.
major issues that we need to get to.
Okay, yes.
You're wearing a big button on your jacket,
permanently attached.
indicating that you are concerned about paid family leave. The council will vote next week on a bill that would provide 11 weeks of paid leave in D.C. It's not the 16 weeks originally proposed by at-large member David Grasso and yourself, but it is nevertheless one of the more generous benefits in the country. How did the council arrive at that 11-week number?
So after introduction by Councilmember Grasso and myself, the bill was referred to the Committee of the Whole, and Chairman Mendelson became the manager of the bill. And let me say, Kojo, I actually have a challenge for you and Tom, since Tom turned the tables on me earlier, which is I cannot think of a bill that has gone through a more extraordinary process than this bill, including even the building of the baseball stadium. We have discussed this bill for more than a year. We have had 3 hearings. We've had input from small and big businesses, national experts, residents, and Chairman Mendelson put a lot of thought and deliberation into this bill. So as you said, the bill that we'll be considering on Tuesday has 11 weeks of parental leave, 8 weeks of family leave. I'm still interested in continuing a discussion. One thing it leaves out from our original bill is personal medical leave, and I'm disappointed. I'm optimistic that we can put it back in because it's just so crucial to making sure that at a time of, as I like to say, a time of extraordinary stress for people, whether it's a good thing, welcoming a new child to their family, or perhaps facing their own personal illness or a parent or child's personal or illness, that they have the financial stability to be able to make good decisions about their health.
800-433-8850. Send email to kojo@wamu.org if you want to weigh in on the issue of paid family leave.
Well, the politics of this is partly the mayor was furious at the chairman, Phil Mendelson, who took the bill that you and David Grasso introduced, expressed some reservations about maybe the extent of it and how it's going to be paid for, and then went into a summer-long mode of where he, after those hearings, where he reworked the bill and didn't talk about collaborativeness, didn't share it with the mayor's office until he presented it to them.
Well, as I said, Tom, I think this bill...
that wasn't your doing.
Right. This bill has had an extraordinary public process. You both are very familiar with the legislative process. The sausage making sort of happens at the end. We're at the end, and things move quickly. I am still optimistic that the mayor is going to get behind this program. Every major Democrat around the country, if you watch the Democratic National
Yes, but
Convention,
the mayor has expressed concerns.
Well, and I take her concerns seriously. But the thing is, the concerns I hear is, well,
let me give you 2 specific concerns. One of them is that this will benefit workers who live in Maryland and Virginia more than it will benefit families who live in the district, because she cited statistics indicating that most of the workers who will benefit from this happen to live in the suburbs.
So, Kojo, I'm focused on the fact that this is going to benefit D.C. businesses. It's going to benefit D.C. businesses. And yes, a majority of our workforce lives outside the district. But the fact of the matter is that a majority of district residents are going to benefit from this bill because they work in the district. And secondly, this has been studied. There is a tremendous sample size on the benefits of paid family leave, and it's called the state of California. And this has been, California has had a family and medical leave program fully since 2004. It's been studied and found to have either negligible impacts, because the other criticism is, oh, this is going to be a catastrophe. Well, actually in California, studies have shown that in fact it has had positive impacts, but certainly not negative impacts.
Well,
It has not affected employment rates in California,
No,
as far as
it
you
hasn't.
know.
well,
here's
California is desperate for
And then can I
employment.
add in one more thing, Kojo? So the council has done something else extraordinary, which is the council budget office has put out a report that I hope Tom Sherwood has already read, but it is an analysis of the economic impacts and as well as the costs and benefits of paid family leave. We put it on our website, so if you go to alyssasilverman.com, you will find that report there, and it has all kinds of great statistics.
Here's an email we got from Stephen. Please ask Councilmember Silverman why only businesses will pay for the family leave benefit. If this is an important social concern, shouldn't all D.C. citizens pay for it through an increase of income taxes? There are some small businesses that pay many yearly fees, so an additional tax seems to penalize those small businesses.
So this is an unfortunate circumstance of our political plight about statehood. So we cannot tax income at its source. We can't tax commuters.
Unlike any other place in
Unlike
America.
any other place in America. So really the only plausible way to do this bill, to provide this benefit, is an employer-based tax. Now let me say this, is that there's a big benefit to small businesses. And I think it was Steve who wrote the email,
Yes,
Kojo?
Stephen.
So to Steve, let me say this, is that, I hear your concern about the cost of doing business in the district. And
I
we
feel
need
your pain.
to be Clinton-like, yes. But it's true. It's true, and I see it
For
every
the $15 an hour minimum wage.
The cost of doing business is about how difficult it is to operate a business and things like permitting. And in fact, Chairman Mendelson addressed this in the release of the bill, saying he also wants to look at DCRA practices and permitting so that we can reduce the cost to business of sort of unnecessary and meddlesome regulatory practices that don't promote the health and welfare, but are just obstacles. But in terms of paid family leave, this is going to be a benefit to small businesses, because right now there's a playing field problem, which is the big guys, the big law firms like Covington, the Googles, even Hilton Hotels, they offer paid family leave. And it's the small guys who can't afford to do it because there's really no market mechanism, market products to do that. And so what it would do, and actually I was at a chamber event of all things, a DC chamber event yesterday, which was designed, I think, to put question marks into our bill, but what it did is reinforce the benefits. It was a company that said, hey, we'll offer these things because what does paid family leave do? It boosts productivity of companies. It boosts morale of employees. It retains women in the workforce, which means that we can also use it as a mechanism to reduce the gender and racial pay gaps in our city. So this is a great thing.
So let me just first. I was somewhat distressed, whether you're for it or not, to learn that even if it goes through smoothly through the council and to the mayor and the Congress, that it may not go into effect for families who are hoping for this until 2020. Some of the people who are advocating for it, their children will be in college before they get to been not that worse. But the overall business complaint that I hear is not about particularly this, or the minimum wage, or the scheduling bill, or sick leave for part-time workers, but it is the totality of all the pro-worker type things that have passed in the last several years that makes it more expensive. And of course, DCRA is a nightmare. If you just fix that, that might fix all the problems.
Well, I'd love to have that committee next year, Tom. But let me address this because this has been a constant
it's kind of the big
theme.
picture thing.
Yes, the cumulative effect, I believe, is what it's called. And when I was a reporter, we sat and talked about it. When I worked for a budget policy group, we talked about it. Here's the thing, though. It was doomsday when we banned smoking in this city. All the restaurants were going to move to Virginia. Then we increased the minimum wage. The sky was going to fall then. Then we gave people access to sick days, and the sky was going to fall. And you know what's happened to our economy? It's gone up.
There's no
It's
question
gone
the
up,
economy
Tom.
is better. Kaya Henderson, as schools chancellor, said to me that the city, for city workers, and I guess city workers will go from 8 weeks to 11 also. Is that correct? Or will
No,
they stay
actually, city workers will remain under the district's program.
which is 8 weeks. When she said that if it were 16 weeks and her teachers could take 16 weeks for whatever necessary, it would be devastating to the school system. But part of this deal, who gets to benefit? There are something like 200,000 federal workers in the city out of the 760,000 jobs. You can't put an employer tax on the federal government.
We can't.
They won't participate. The district government workers won't participate.
They already
Well,
have
they will
policy
have.
to
They will
get
participate
paid weeks.
in the
Yes.
district's
Well, the one
program.
was less, 8 weeks. And then there are, it only applies to companies that are, is it headquartered in the district? Because if I'm a Marriott Corporation and you live, which is headquartered, I think, in Maryland, any employees of the Marriott Corporation won't participate.
Well, I think work in Maryland for Marriott.
Work in Maryland,
But
but-
if you work at a Marriott hotel in the district,
Right.
then
The
this
JW
will
Marriott,
apply.
if you work there, your Marriott will pay the.
Our original bill, Tom, included federal government workers, included reverse commuters. But once again, we have a statehood issue. We have an issue with Congress that we can't tax income at its source. We can't tax commuters.
Okay.
So therefore, we had, our original bill had those folks being able to pay in. They would pay in as employees, and then if you work for a private district-based business, they would pay in on the employer
Okay,
payroll side.
The big question politically
Yeah.
for me is, I tweeted it, and you may have seen it, is all these progressive things that are being done by the council, whether
Yes.
I'm for them or you're for them or against them, is that how does this mesh with an incoming Republican Congress, House, and Senate, and a president who none of whom have the best image of the district because they don't know much about us.
But the president said he's interested in
Well,
paying
Yes.
them.
he didn't.
Okay,
well,
yes.
that was,
Keep
that,
going,
that was
Kojo.
that was
Keep
on
going,
Tuesday. Let's see
Kojo.
what happens on Wednesday.
Well,
But I'm just concerned. Are you at all concerned that the members of Congress will have free reign to interfere with not only with this, but the issues of our
that's-
gun laws and all
That's
these
why
things?
the push for statehood is so important. But to double down on what Kojo said, this is popular. Paid family leave is popular not only among Democrats, of which at the Democratic National Convention, every single Democrat talked about the importance of paid family leave, but Republican voters support it as well. National polling has shown a majority of Republican voters, the party supposedly of
Gotta
family
move on.
values,
Gotta move on.
supports
Yeah.
paid family
Okay,
leave.
well,
Gotta
I don't
move
know
on
one
to the next
Republican on the
step.
Hill who's endorsed paid
Well, a
family leave.
majority of Republican voters say they support it.
Well, the president-elect says
And the
he supports it.
president-elect had a 6-week proposal as well.
Here's Adam in Ward 2 who can help us move this conversation forward. Adam, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Hello. I am actually looking at the Council Budget Office economic impact study that Councilmember Silverman had mentioned.
Thank you, Adam.
Thought you wanted to talk
He
about the
sounds like
calendar
he's-
for this.
He sounds like he has an asterisk on this. Go ahead.
I just wanted to bring up that it says over the next 10 years, the district's GDP would grow at an average rate of about 1.9% if the council were to implement this proposed paid leave bill. So I wanted to ask Councilmember Silverman what she would say in response to the mayor and maybe some of her colleagues who are thinking about tabling a vote for universal paid leave.
What's
on
the next
Tuesday
step
and
here?
voting to table.
Well,
that bill.
thank you,
What's the
Adam.
next step
And
here?
once again, yes, the report is on my website, alyssasilverman.com, or at the council's website as well. What I would say to that is what I said earlier. This has been an extraordinary process. We need to move forward. I think it is not time to delay this bill. That is just a delay tactic to table it. We've had a lot of discussion. We need to move forward. As Tom said, it's going to take some time to implement this program, and so we need to. The time is now. We need to move forward.
Do you have the votes to withstand the tabling move?
I
Don't know?
believe we do.
Don't have them
and
until you actually have them.
That's
I know
right,
that.
Tom.
I
You know that. So, as Adam said, there is an effort. I believe I hear it's being led by one of my colleagues to table, and I just think that there's no reason to do that. As I said, more than any bill I've ever seen, this bill has been debated.
Does the chairman want this bill to be voted on Tuesday?
Yes, the chairman wants this bill to be voted on, and he will not vote to table.
Much of your focus on the council has been on affordable housing. Rents and housing prices in the city are skyrocketing. The number of affordable rental units has declined 11% since 2009. Last month, Mayor Bowser announced an investment of $106 million to go toward preserving affordable housing. The idea is to tap a series of nonprofit, for-profit, and private developers. How far do you think that'll go in addressing the issue?
I think it's a great effort by the mayor, and I applaud the mayor's efforts in funding affordable housing. It's not enough, Kojo. We lost over a decade. We lost half of our affordable rental units and almost all of reasonably, like, houses. You can't find a house pretty much except east of the river under $400,000 for sale anymore. But we need to do more. And I know the mayor is interested in doing more. We need to do, I think, a few things. Number one, funding the trust fund, as you talked about. So this is our fund that we use to build and preserve affordable housing.
Excuse me, is anyone opposed to more affordable housing? The money, it sounds like an investment. It sounds like better community. I mean,
I agree, Tom. Sure,
but who's against it?
Well, here's the issue. It's not who's against it, but how we use our resources. For example, there was a vote earlier this week about a tax cut to our deed and recordation tax. That went through. I voted against it, and Robert White voted against it because it takes money away. The deed and recordation tax, 15% of it goes to the Housing Production Trust Fund. When you do a tax cut there, it lowers the amount of money going into our affordable housing fund. And what this tax cut does, it gives a little bit of a tax break to some low and moderate income homeowners, but really gives a big tax break to upper income folks. And look, housing prices are ridiculous in our city. I agree. But the thing is, we have limited resources, and we need to use those resources where they're going to help people who need the help the most. So that's really the issue, Tom. It's not that people are against it. It's about how we use our dollars. In my opinion, all of our dollars that are focused on housing should go to help our low and moderate income renters and homeowners.
Glad you brought that up. Go ahead.
I was going to bring up the quality of life with outdoor video billboards.
Oh,
not
yes.
Not yet. I want to talk a little more about housing because in many cases, the city requires developers to make a certain percentage of new housing affordable.
Yes.
But as we know from several reports, including one done by WOMU, the city has yet to rescind tax abatements given to a developer who did not follow through. The city has never done this. Are there any plans to address that by the council?
So I think you're speaking about the Adams Morgan project there.
Correct.
And in fact,
Whenever
I've
you
been
mention
working
a specific developer, but I'm also saying that
Yeah.
the city has never, ever done this before, rescinded a tax abatement.
So we need to start looking at that, Kojo. And what I would say is that we need to, this is part of what I was saying earlier, we need to use our dollars wisely. And so looking at things like clawbacks, I think, is a consideration for the future, and we need to really do our due diligence to make sure that if we're giving a tax break, a tax expenditure, I mean that costs us money. That's future tax dollars we're not getting. We need to make sure that A, it's creating affordable housing, and B, it's creating jobs for district residents, which gets back to the issue earlier you cited about the mayor's concern about UPLA. What we need to be doing every time we give dollars to a developer is say, okay, now how much affordable housing are we getting out of this? How many jobs are we getting out of this? Who are you working with so that we have residents in place who are going to be able to take those jobs? I don't think we've used all our tools that are in the toolbox to maximize our investments.
What's UPLA, Tom?
The Universal Paid Leave Act. Sorry, I've been tagged twice now as going from journalist
Go ahead,
to
I was making a note.
politician.
Well, another issue you guys may vote on is Jack Evans. I don't know if he's introduced it yet, but emergency legislation on this. All of these outdoor video billboards that are springing up all over town. A company started putting them up. DCRA, which we criticized earlier, has objected because the rules weren't followed. The city filed suit. The city won in court and said these things were improperly done, and that's where it is. And now the lobbyists for the billboard industry, at least one of them, wants the council to to vote emergency legislation on Tuesday to say, oh, well, we're going to leave the ones that are already there and everybody else will have to follow the law. That doesn't seem like a very good thing. Do you think there are 9 votes to override that?
I do not, and I hope there are not, Tom. There are actually 2 sign issues that we'll be dealing with, I believe, on Tuesday. I hope we won't.
One is that I didn't want to get mixed up with the Nats
I hope we won't be dealing with this emergency, which is really to do an end run around what is current court case.
Right.
And my position on this is let's see what the courts decide. Let's run the course on the.
Well, we've got an initial court ruling that these things were put up without proper permitting.
That's right.
But this would wipe all that out.
It would, and so that's why I'm totally against it.
All right, the Nats baseball park.
Yes.
They asked for 10 signs, a rushed hearing, a rushed hearing, and a rushed vote. They now said that maybe it's going to be 5 signs, but we're going to have video billboards everywhere in our capital city.
So this is a big deal, and I'm sorry it hasn't gotten more attention. I think I might be the lone vote against this. And as you both know, I'm a tremendous baseball fan. I'm a tremendous Nats fan. But this is really not an issue about the Nats. This is an issue about urban planning, what our city's going to look like. There are serious public safety issues. But these are like, for folks who are listening, those big billboards outside the Verizon Center. The Nats want to put up big billboards like that. There's a distracted driving issue with these billboards. There's an issue about the quality of life. Let me just say, I mean, this is an extraordinary. Contrast this, I think in 1 month we'll decide this tremendous precedent-setting issue compared to paid leave, which has had a 14-month review. But one more thing, Kojo, on the Nat signs.
You got 30 seconds.
Okay, which is that I'd strongly persuade my colleagues to look at this again because the ANC that would be directly impacted against it. All residents are against what the Nats want to do. We need to slow this process down. So I really would, and if you're concerned about what our city looks like, please contact my colleagues and tell them what you think.
There's a nearby resident named Tom Sherwood.
Yes.
Sherwood. It's like the highway. They were going to ram all these highways through the city. It was stopped, and now it looks like we're going to have billboards everywhere because everywhere it's going to be an entertainment district.
Well, that is what the hearing brought out, is that there were property owners around who are like, oh, this is great. I want to put a sign on my building, too. And there's serious issues with property values might decline. People bought houses there, and now they're going to have lights blaring into their apartments and condos all the time.
I'm afraid that's all the time
Kojo,
we have.
come on,
Alyssa
we
Silverman
got
is
Jack
an
Evans in here
at-large
now.
member of the D.C. Council.
Refuses to leave.
She
Jack
is an
and I agree on
independent.
that.
Yes, apparently she's been taking lessons from
Oh,
Jack.
thank you, Kojo
And
and
my
Tom. It
regards
was a
to your
pleasure.
parents, yes. We'll be joined shortly by Rich Madalino. Richard Madalino is a Maryland State Senator representing District 18. And in order to introduce the conversations about Maryland, Tom, I will go to an email that we got from Jim in Glendale, Maryland. Jim in Glendale, Maryland says simply this: either Mr. Franklin was drunk on the job or he was inappropriately using a county vehicle for personal use. Which is it? In case you want to know what we're referring to, this has to do with Prince George's County Council member Mel Franklin, who was this week charged with DUI after he was on Pennsylvania Avenue in Forestville and apparently rear-ended another car and was tested and was charged with DUI. This is the 3rd incident in the last few years in which Council member Franklin has crashed a county-owned vehicle, and this is an individual who has serious political ambitions. By the way, joining us in studio now is Richard Madalino. He's a Maryland State Senator representing District 18, which includes Montgomery County. Senator Rich, good to see you.
Nice to see you, Kojo. And
you want
Tom.
to talk about drunk driving?
Yeah, no, I don't want to talk about drunk driving.
Well, Tom will.
Well, I just think we need to have the process play out. I mean, he was charged.
Yes.
He will face whatever penalties there are in Maryland for what kinds of drunk driving issues you have, and what they're not accidents, they're wrecks. I want the media to stop calling them accidents. They're wrecks. They're deadly. So whether he now he wanted to maybe run for, I think it was one of the county chairman or a county executive.
You're also thinking of
maybe one of those at-large seats.
Yep.
I mean, there's so
all
many
of the
things
above,
going on.
county executive.
Politically, it's the least of his actual problems. He needs to find out. He needs to know what's wrong with him that he is caught and has a wreck, drunk driving at .10, which is a lot. and deal with that, and then the politics that will follow after that. But it's, some people are calling on him to resign. I think this is a case where you actually, in fact, have the process play out and then see what the people think about it.
Speaking of politics, let's put our guest on the hot spot immediately, because one of your colleagues in the Senate, who also is a Prince George's County resident, Senator Ulysses Curry, decided that he was resigning from the Senate and then decided to unresign from the Senate because he was disturbed over the fight that was taking place over who should replace him in the short term. He apparently felt that that should be his wife, but when the fight broke out, that apparently was not going to happen, and he therefore decided not to resign from the seat anymore. It would appear that the people in Prince George's County, the Prince George's County Democratic Committee who make this decision, didn't like the idea of being told what to do. Care to comment?
I think it's time for us to rethink the way that we do the appointment process when there is a vacancy. Virginia has a special election. We could have a special election. You could have a process where someone is appointed for a short period of time, and then you have the special election. We have moved from a technological standpoint. You could have a simple, straightforward, all candidate ranked voting process to find a vacancy. You could do it by mail, get it done quick, and then we could have someone in office that the people have chosen as their representative, as opposed to letting it just fall to a central committee. I mean, at the same time, the Montgomery County Central Committee is debating Senator Raskin.
I was about to say there's Senator Raskin, and then over in Baltimore there's Senator Pugh.
Right.
Exactly.
And the district has this. The Democratic State Committee appointed Robert White. He won the election ultimately, but they still appointed him to the seat. I don't know why it can't just be a temporary matter and just have an election, particularly in the state Senate race for something that's small.
I mean, I've tried to say. Oh, thanks for saying it's small. But
small meaning geographically.
Geographically,
yes. Not qualitatively, at least not yet.
I've tried to propose in the past, and it would not resolve these issues today. But if a vacancy occurred at least in the first half of the term, that just like a U.S. Senate vacancy where you have to run that next general election, how about doing that as a stopgap so that someone doesn't get the seat for 3 or more years following an election. So
have you talked to Senator Curry about this?
I have not seen Senator Curry since this decision. I mean, Senator Curry has been a great person. He has a fascinating personal story of accomplishment. Born literally the child of sharecroppers in North Carolina, and what he's been able to achieve. But sadly, Senator Curry said a month ago he was too sick to continue in office, and now we're in this situation where he's going to continue in office. It's an unfortunate.
Wanting his wife to replace him, and I think that was part of the problem. I mean, it sounds like it was more personal to him. Well, it's not that there was a fight over this nomination. It's just that his wife wasn't going to get it.
I thought about this. Had his wife said, or had the senator said, my wife will simply be a placeholder. She will not run for this office permanently.
Right.
Could that have changed the situation somewhat?
Well, you're speaking logically. We're talking, but this is the politics.
If you have questions.
I think that was their intent.
Okay.
It was for that to occur. Okay. But even then, I don't know if that would have resolved the situation because
people get temporary. I mean, David Catania said he was going to, in the district of government, he was going to run for one council term only, 1 4-year term. He did 3, and then he ran for mayor. So you can change your mind once you make those.
If you have questions or comments for Senator Madaleno, please call us at 800-433-8850 or send email to kojo@wamu.org. Maryland's Attorney General recently set up a hotline for people to report hate crimes. Has there been an increase in hate crimes and racial incidents that legislators have been made aware of?
It certainly feels like it. My own daughter's school, Westland Middle School, had a bathroom vandalized with swastikas. There was a news report yesterday of several cars in Burtonsville that were vandalized, and on this one, it appears that it was a Trump supporter who was targeted for the vandalism. So it does seem like these things are on the rise, Unfortunately, just yesterday, Lieutenant Governor Rutherford said before at an event for the Jewish community, he was unaware of the of a spike in hate incidences, and the governor made the same. Governor Hogan made the same comment last week, and it would be nice if the governor, the lieutenant governor, were coming out strongly, like Montgomery County has, like several of the local governments have, and said, we won't tolerate this. This is not the Maryland way. It doesn't matter who's doing it and who's targeted. This has to stop, because that does fray the community. And I'm so happy that Attorney General Brian Frosh has stepped up and put out the hate crimes hotline.
It is actually not so much the number as if there are hundreds, thousands, or whoever incidents. It's just that if you allow these that do get publicity and they happen and no one says anything, there's no moral leadership. It's almost as, I know when Brian Frosh put out this number, which is 866-481-8361, he was saying people have to have a way to express this and to report it and so people know more about it. I don't think it's because you have to have hundreds of things like this for a leader of the state to denounce it. One or two is enough because of the social media now. One incident can be replicated zillions of times.
And that was what was so troubling about the lieutenant governor's comment yesterday,
clueless.
because he shrugged his shoulders and said, well, hate, we've always had hate. There was hate before the election. There'll be hate after the election. And I can't disagree with him on that. Right. But as you just said, it's time, I think, for people to stand up and say these types of incidences, no matter who's targeted, are intolerable, and they must stop, and they must be countered, whether it's 1 or 100.
It's like President Trump, who people say hasn't done it well enough, but has in some cases made some steps forward to disavow what people now call the alt-right, which is the hate right side of the people who supported him.
Well, let me say this publicly. We've had the lieutenant governor on the show when he was a candidate. We have been making repeated efforts to get Governor Hogan on the show, and we'll be making repeated attempts to get the lieutenant governor on the show. Hopefully we'll get a positive
Governor
response.
Hogan has a great story to tell on his campaign as he gets ready to run for re-election in 2018. I hope he comes on.
Senator Madalena, you fought hard against hate speech and discrimination, including calling for a ban on state travel to Indiana because of that state's religious freedom law. Are there any laws on the books now, or what laws are there on the books now? And is the General Assembly planning any additional legislation to address hate crimes and discrimination?
Well, fortunately, Maryland has a hate crimes law already on the books. It covers race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, national origin. We have a pretty broad hate crimes law. When we passed it, everyone said, or many of the opponents said, religious leaders would be pulled from the pulpits and charged with crimes for the variety of things that they preach, or it would shut down conversation. I don't think that's happened in the state of Maryland, but I think it's important to say to somebody, when a car is vandalized, I was having this conversation with someone last night. When a car is vandalized, if my car is vandalized one morning and I walk outside, I say, oh, well, that's frustrating. That's disturbing. I might look around to see if someone else's car has been vandalized, but it's a crime of property, right? If my car is vandalized with the word fag spray painted on it, that is a different crime. That impact on me and my family is different. That impact on my neighbors is very different. And so it needs to be treated differently. And I'm hoping that Attorney General Frosh, others will take a look at our hate crimes law and say, after pretty much a decade, how is it working? Do we need improvements in this area? And maybe we will be taking a look at this at the next session. I was having this conversation with my staff yesterday of, maybe this is time to look at the hate crimes law to see if it is structured the way we need it moving forward.
Well, given the tenor of the presidential race, there have been concerns expressed that it's giving people the freedom to feel like they can be more expressive in whatever hates that they have, because they believe, whether Trump says or not, that the president is encouraging those, the president-elect is encouraging those kinds of things. Again, it's kind of the moral leadership of political leaders, not just what in fact is happening.
And that's the difficult line with hate crimes is, being able to express yourself
Right.
is one thing. Doing damage to
Physical
somebody
action.
else, a physical action, a vandalism, those sorts of things, that is something different. That is an underlying crime. A hate crimes, the current hate crimes law in Maryland, there has to be an underlying crime
Right.
that triggers it, and then
Vandalism
you go
would
into
be an underlying crime.
And assault, something like that, does suggest that there was a crime, and then there's an add-on.
Can we go to Metro?
Sure.
Purple Line,
Yes,
transportation, traffic clogging in Bethesda, Silver Spring.
Are we going to walk out to the station?
Well, we can't walk out. There's no room to walk because everything is horrible. There's a hearing on the Hill today. Jerry Connolly of Virginia, others bashing Metro again. It seems to me that I think everyone who's been involved in public policy for 40 years is responsible for where Metro is today. But it seems to me we're stuck in this thing where Maryland and Virginia want to complain about Metro but not step up to fix it until Metro fixes itself for money. It seems that we're in a very difficult situation. The district has proposed a 1% regional sales tax. It's talked about a variety of different things, closing the Silver Line, which really irritated people in Virginia. But do you see, being a public policy person, any way through this political thicket, or does Metro have to keep...
Imbroglio?
Yeah, that's not a word I would have used, but go ahead. It seems like a mess. Metro is a mess, and there's more finger pointing about this than there is getting in the room to decide. Virginia doesn't want to do any money until if things get fixed. It says you fix your car, and then we'll give you more money to put a new roof on it. It doesn't make any sense. And Metro is suffering.
We have to figure out a way to solve this problem. I mean, there's no way around it. WMATA, the metro system, is too important to our local economy, to everyone's daily lives, for it to continue to go downhill. Looking at a region-wide tax and a dedicated revenue, which some people say is the answer to some of WMATA's problems, I don't know if that fix there wouldn't come back to create another problem later. If you do a 1% sales tax, the wonderful thing about the sales tax is it's relatively predictable until it's not, when we have a recession.
Right.
And then when you had a recession and that money slowed down, would then Metro turn to the three jurisdictions and say, well, we need money, just when the three jurisdictions are often dealing with their own economic
So a dedicated
woes.
funding source doesn't have to be a sales tax. And let me just hasten before I get an angry tweet here. It also has to come with dramatic change in the way Metro is governed and operated. The union contracts, the management system, everything has to be updated on this thing. It's just not pouring more money into Metro. But if it's not going to be a sales tax, you can't. Where does the money come from?
Well, I do think that the future of transportation revenues, and you've heard this and you've probably done shows about this, are on vehicle miles traveled and assessing your taxes that way, not just on a gas tax, but on how much you're driving and at what time of day you're driving.
Who's going to know that?
And well, we all carry around smartphones. The
More
cars
government.
are all,
Oh my goodness.
there is no problem with, and Oregon has moved forward with this, there would be no problem with data from a car talking to the data at the pump in order to assess your tax when you buy gasoline for your vehicle.
So poor people who have older cars, less gas efficient cars would pay more.
I'm not saying that this is a solution for
I'm attacking this.
2017. I'm not saying that this is a solution for 2017, but it could be where we are in 2027. But the interesting thing about this sort of model, which is why it's so interesting about Metro, is if you go to this sort of model, we're going to have to set up a regional system to collect and keep the money within the Washington region. No one in Montgomery County or Prince George or Fairfax are going to accept paying this sort of tax if that money is going to Annapolis or Richmond to go to somewhere else in the state.
True.
That would be something that would go to a regional approach. And probably the answer to our problem, and you may laugh when I say this,
I'll try not to.
is moving forward with an even larger regional transportation authority that can collect money and do transportation writ large in the area, not just metro, not just metro rail, metro bus, but all of the roads and the transit that service our area, and do it in a coordinated fashion.
An entity that would be able to run a system and raise the funds to run it.
Right. And other states, other communities have this. Denver has a regional transit board.
Yeah, but they have marijuana.
It is elected. It is elected. It has taxing authority. It's accountable to the public. There are things that you can do.
That sounds long term. What about just getting people to ride it next week?
Well,
Why don't we cut the fares?
That is continuing. I mean, I hope you do have Governor Hogan on board on the show. To be able to
Speaking
ask
of Governor
these questions.
Hogan, how are Democrats in the General Assembly working with Governor Hogan and Republicans? Do you see areas of agreement?
Well, I would remind people that the Washington Post had a poll that came out about 6 weeks ago that said that only 46% of the people polled were willing to vote for Larry Hogan against a no-name opponent. Now, unfortunately, the Washington Post put the headline as 72% job approval, but it's fascinating that 72% of people like him, but only 46% are willing to say they'd vote for him against nobody. So I think the governor has a huge challenge moving forward now with the Trump administration that's going to be pushing against, pushing for things like taking away health care to many Marylanders, restricting women's reproductive rights, targeting a variety of minority communities, going after the immigrant community, doing things like forcing Maryland to accept Virginia's concealed carry law.
Hogan wasn't for it.
Permits.
Governor Hogan made it quite clear he won't even answer questions today about Trump.
Well, the funny part is he's going to have to, because if the federal government, if Congress starts passing laws like the NRA's top priority, which is to enforce a nationwide concealed carry reciprocity agreement, so that when Virginia could come into Bethesda with a concealed
Only got
carry
about 15
permit,
seconds left.
I think he can't avoid it, and it's going to hurt him.
Who do you support as the Democratic nominee for governor?
I think we have an incredible slate of good
nobody
candidates.
yet.
Richard Madaleno is a Maryland state senator representing
avoidance.
District 18, which includes Montgomery County. Senator Rich, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you all. Happy holidays, by the way.
And happy holidays to you also.
Closed Metro during the inauguration. That's
Tom
what I-
Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's a reporter for NBC4 and a columnist with the current newspapers. Thank you all for listening. I'm Kojo Namdi.
The Kojo Namdi Show is produced by Michael Martinez, Ingelisa Schrobsdorf, Taylor Burney, Elizabeth Weinstein, Ruth Tam, and Avery Kleinman. The engineer is Meg Bunting. Podcast of all shows and audio archives